மறக்காம
Everyone,
surprise
today I'm making tofu. So I make tofu at home on a regular basis, and one of the most frequently asked questions is how easy is it to make tofu? And my answer is always, it's much easier than you think. So today I'm going to show you how. So these are the items you need. So the first thing you need is soya beans. Make sure it's non-GM, if entirely possible. So I got this from Pan Center in London. So these are organic. And secondly, you will need something called nigari. It might sound completely alien to you, and it was to me as well. And this is what it looks like. It looks like sea salt. What it does essentially is to make the soya milk curdle. So the next thing you need is a tofu press. So I bought this from Amazon. I think this is from Tofu Box. They're excellent. They do tofu kits. It looks really elegant, really lovely. What it consists of is basically this border which will shape the tofu. There's a base, and then there's a press on top of it. So you're going to press the tofu this way. And then you need some cheesecloths. You can buy them quite easily online nowadays. So you will need this to squeeze out, to separate the pulp. And you also need this to line tofu press. And you also need a big pot, the biggest pot that you can find in your kitchen. You will need it to hold up to 3.5 liter. But if you don't have a big pot, it's not the end of the world. You can just separate in 2 pots, or you can do it in 2 batches. And on top of that, you need either a blender, a normal household blender. So in my case, I'm using a cold press juicer, and I'll explain to you why that is. It will make your life easier. But otherwise, any household blender will do. So you need to prepare the beans from the night before. Wash the beans thoroughly until the water is completely cleared. Add plenty of water and leave it to soak overnight. This is what the soya beans look like once you soak them overnight. You can see they increase in size quite a few times over. So what you need to do now is rinse out the water, and it's ready to use. First thing you want to do is to make soya milk. So the ratio between water and the beans is 7:1. So for 500 grams of dry beans, you need 3.5 liters of water. So here it is. Here's my 3.5 liters of water and 500 grams of soya beans. It's ready to go. So here comes the fun part. To make soya milk, you can use your household blender and just pour in the beans and the water, split it until it turns into soya milk, line a bowl with cheesecloths, and squeeze out the soya milk. But I like my life easy, so I actually use a cold press juicer to do that for me. So I use it for juicing, obviously, but it's actually excellent for making nut milk, and I'll show you how I do it. So I've got my cold press juicer set up. I've got a container here to catch the pulp, and the other one to catch the milk. And there's a little flop here that I can open and close to release the soya milk. And I also have my soya beans ready. So I'm turning the machine on. It's gonna make a little bit of noise. So as you can see, I finished the content of this big bowl with 3.5 liters of water and 500 grams of soya beans. It turns into this big pot of soya milk ready to be cooked. So I finished making the soya milk, and you could see how easy it was. But you can use a normal blender and cheesecloths, that's not a problem. But I'm also left with this big pot of pulp from soya beans. So this is it. Please don't throw it away. This is nutritious and wonderful stuff. You can use it for cooking and all sorts of things. I'll make a video very soon on how to turn this wonderful pulp into delicious biscuits. But in the meantime, I'm going to put it in the freezer bag and then freeze it. It will keep for quite a while. So the soya milk is ready to be boiled at this point. So I'm gonna turn the heat on. So you want high heat to start with, and then watch quite carefully in the process. So this is a process you want to be a little bit patient because you will take a little while for it to heat up. It's a big pot. So the important thing here is to keep stirring and not to try to cheat with really strong heat, because you could end up with burn bits inside the pot, which will turn the soya milk bitter. And things to watch out is that it does have a tendency to go from quite calmly looking to fully boiling in a matter of seconds. So you really want to watch out and use the biggest pot you have in your kitchen. So you notice there's quite a lot of foam on the surface, and what you want to do is to remove it with a wooden spoon. It looks like whipped cream. So this will actually make the soya beans bitter, so you want to remove it as much as possible. So you want to keep stirring, removing the foam as often as you can as you see them forming. So I think we're pretty close here. You can see this layer of foam, really fine foam forming. Okay, starting to boil now. So what I'm going to do is to reduce the heat to the lowest and keep it simmering for 5 to 10 minutes. So this process is extremely important because as you're simmering it, it takes away the rawness and bitterness of the soya beans. So you're left with this velvety, smooth soya milk. So I left it simmering for about 8 minutes now, 8 to 10 minutes. So I'm gonna turn the heat off. So if you're actually making soya milk, you're done. The soya milk is ready. So you can drink it like this hot, maybe add a little bit of sugar, or you can put it in the fridge and drink it chilled. You should keep in the fridge quite well for 2 to 3 days. And I have to tell you, the smell of freshly made soya milk, you really need to experience it. But we're making tofu today, so let's move on to the next step. Before you start creating the bean curd, you want to leave it for about 5 minutes. I tend to leave it longer because if soya milk is too hot, it's going to kill the nigari. So I'm gonna leave it for about 15 to 20 minutes. While we're waiting for the soya milk to cool off a little bit, we need to prepare the nigari. So I've got a packet that's open here. So for the amount of soya beans we have, which is 500 grams, we need 1.5 teaspoon of nigari. So I've got a spoon here, that's half a teaspoon. So I'll need to do 3 of these. So 1, 2, 3 teaspoons. And then what you want to do is add a little bit of water so it would dissolve. You can just use cold water. Okay, it's ready to go. So the soya milk has cooled down a little bit, and as you can see there's a kind of skin forming on top of the soya milk. Don't be alarmed, it's perfectly normal. It's actually a delicacy in Japanese cuisine, and all you have to do is to scoop it up. So I'm gonna put it in a container. I can add it to my soup later on. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a piece of tofu, essentially. Now here's the magic part. I'm going to add in the nigari that we prepared earlier on. So I'm gonna add it, just drizzle into it. I'm gonna stir it a few times. And I leave it. So what you don't want to do is over stirring it and just leave it to do its job. So while we're waiting for the soya milk to curdle, we want to prepare the tofu press. So what you need is a shallow baking tray. It could be shallow in this, doesn't matter. And what it does is it's going to catch the fluid, the water, coming out of the tofu press. So here's the kid. You want to lay the bottom part of it and then put the border around it. And on top of that, take your cheesecloth and then just lay it on top of it and gently press it into the mold. And that's it. So it's been 15 minutes and you can see the texture has changed slightly. You can see parts of it start to curdle. I think it's ready. Here's the tofu press. And what you need is a ladle like this with holes in the middle so the water will go through. And just scoop up the curd. As you can see, it's curdled up really beautifully. So you want to be quite gentle with this and then slowly transfer the curd into the mold. Oh, this is beautiful. Oh, the smell is sensational. It's kind of scrumbly kind of texture. So you want to place it quite evenly, as humanly possible anyway. So I'm going to continue doing this until I finish all the curd. You know, this is so wonderful about making tofu is that you end up with, you know, a wonderful piece of tofu, but the process is so therapeutic. You feel like you're really making something that's special. In the process, you don't need to worry too much about draining the liquid off as you scoop out the bean curd, because everything, all the liquid will be drained from the bottom of the tofu press. So now what you want to do is to wrap it up and cover the tofu like a little baby. You know, you kind of just like this, top to bottom, and then on the other side. So this will protect the tofu when we put the top part of the press onto it. But try to keep it as even as possible, so the surface of the tofu that you end up with will be reasonably flat. Okay, so now I'm going to put the top part onto the press. And what you want to do now is to take a couple of tins, or in my case, I've got jars, a couple of jars here. And it really depends on how firm you want your tofu to be. It's determined by the weight you put on it and also the length of time. So I'm going to put one for now. I like my tofu quite tender, so I'm going to just put one jar. It's a big jar, and I'm going to leave it. If you like firm tofu, you can leave it for up to 15 or even 20 minutes. But I like it tender, quite soft. So I'm going to leave it for probably about 12 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes. So it's been about 12 minutes, so I'm ready to unpack it. So I'm going to take up the jar and then the lid. It's looking good. So you can see the water is being drained off through these little holes from the tofu press. So I'm going to take that off. Oh, look at that. And then gently unwrap it. I mean, I went for quite a tender texture, so it's still quite soft. I can feel it just by removing the cloth. Oh, it's looking so beautiful. So now I'm going to gently transfer it to a plate. So this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to take a plate as flat as possible, put it on top of it. I'm going to quite gently turn it over. Drain off the water as much as possible and then flip. There you go, that's a piece of tofu. It's massive. I'm really pleased with it. I can't wait to taste it. Little piece. Just take it in my hand. So I'm going to drizzle a little bit of soy sauce here. I'm going to grab some chopsticks. This is so exciting. So let me just have a taste. So I'm going to taste the tofu I just made. Oh, it smells amazing. Oh, it's like eating velvet. You can buy some really good tofu nowadays in the health food store, but it's nothing like the one you make at home, so please try it. So this is how you make tofu, and as you can see, it's really quite easy. So I hope you give it a try, and if you have any questions, I'm here for you. And if you made tofu before, I'd love to hear your experience. Hope you like the video. See you next time.